Hello, and welcome to another installment of Astrology versus Psychology. And today we're going to be looking at alcoholism, which is a very fun and interesting topic for a lot of us. Full disclosure, I am from Wisconsin, so I have a lot of experience with this with those around me, unfortunately, and with clients, struggling with this. So I think that I have a little bit of maybe insight that I can share with you and maybe help you if you're struggling with this. And I'm joined here today by Sarah Castaneda,
Hi, I'm Sarah.
who has
Uh,
just got a book out, right?
yes, well, it's coming out. It's called Underdog Bet, and I just got the PDF and it was approved. So it's taken like a year, I know, but it finally come out. So yes, and I'm editor here at Authortunities Hub, Fantastic Acrostics, and yes, and I love to always attend these sessions, so I am here. Absolutely.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Mhm.
And I should say I'm Nikki DeCaster with 11th House Publishing, a neuro-subversive publishing company and a nonprofit. And I have 10 plus years experience as an astrologer. I'm down in the trenches with this stuff. So I thought it would be interesting to see how psychology and astrology can work together to better understand the energies at play and help people heal ultimately. Um, as I've said before, astrology is the kind of father or mother of psychology. The Jungian principles come from astrology. So there's already that overlap, and I'm kind of bringing it all home. So there's not a good or bad energy in astrology. It's all a spectrum and a frequency. And so if we understand that, it's one step closer to being able to work with all of these energies. So for alcohol, right away, first thing that comes to my mind is Neptune. So Neptune energy is all about escaping reality. It's, the understanding that we're all one. It's a very sensitive, empathic, intuitive planet. And so a lot of times people get into alcohol to escape reality. And we're talking about alcohol, but you can really put this to any addiction at the end of the day. I would expect Neptune to be paired with either the ascendant or sun, moon, possibly Mars or Mercury, depending on what's going on with it. And that's going to flavor the type of alcoholic that comes out. So if it's paired with Mars, you might get more of the angry drunk, or like somebody who's super suppressed 1 minute and they have those bursts, right? Or with the ascendant, you would expect the same. Paired with Mercury, it might be more of a cerebral, inward, introspective drunk, or issue. Paired with the moon, you're going to get somebody who's more weepy and emotional. So that kind of interplay is seen with this. You've also got Jupiter aspects with this. And so Jupiter and Neptune both are co-rulers of Pisces. So Pisces energy, 12th house energy, both of these things could be seen heavily as well. Like, so if you have a lot of stuff in the 12th house, that could kick up the need to escape reality. And so you grab onto this thing that alters it, makes it a little bit more tenable, at least in the short term, right? But Jupiter is the planet of abundance. It's a giant planet, right? I want more. And it's jovial. And so you get kind of the partying social aspect with Jupiter, or Sagittarius, which Jupiter rules. So you can have that aspect if you've got more of the socializing drunk, I guess. And then sometimes depending, like you might get something like Pluto, like if Pluto's involved, if there's like a deep trauma, there might be a desire to kind of cover it up, especially if there's already like a Neptune or Jupiter aspect to that Pluto. So it can get a little complex, but always, and you know, I've seen a lot of charts at this point. I see Neptune or Jupiter consistently in a prominent place. So we'll see that in some of the celebrity charts that I bring up. But Sarah, did you have any experience with this? With people around you or
Um,
connection?
no, well, yeah, I don't drink at all anymore. I stopped 2 years ago. I did go to I was I went to um see if it was alcoholism, and that never really worked or helped me. But when I went to trauma therapy, that's what helped me. And what it was is that I drank more and more as I went through a very traumatic experience, and I was doing it to escape. So I, when I left trauma therapy after 2 months, I had no desire. I didn't need any more help. Me personally, I'm not saying other people should follow my path. It just reminded me of a dark place.
Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't have a desire to, and I still don't. It just reminds me of a time in my life that was just bad. And I hadn't really had a problem before. It just accelerated during that time, during that like 4-year period, because I wanted to escape. I didn't want to be in real life.
And that brings up a good point too with astrology. Sometimes you might have a transit. So Neptune is always doing something. You know, it's
Mhm.
always going around, or Jupiter, or you know, and so if you get a transit where it's like 4 years where Neptune is kind of stationed on your moon, you might get something like that gets more kicked up than other times.
Yeah.
You know, and so knowing that, and then knowing the energy of Neptune. So in the lower end of that escapism is drugs and alcohol. Just whatever, shut it off, make the pain stop, make the overwhelming empathy, you know, go away. On
Yeah.
the sort of middle tier is you get into things like escaping through books or TV or movies. You know,
Right.
something that's more socially acceptable, but it's still like not really dealing with the real world.
Hmm.
You know, and on the highest level, Neptune is this godlike love, super spiritual, super creative. So if you can get into that higher frequency and decide that, you know, rather than be intimidated by the world around you, you can create it. Neptune on the highest frequency is dreams, visions, you know, it's a very beautiful energy.
I wish
So
I had gone there. I
you're
did not.
writing poetry, all of that, that's the high vibe Neptune.
Well, I did actually write some really beautiful poetry during the time, but it wasn't the time I was going through the horrible period. It was the time I was in trauma therapy, healing, like trying to heal myself. That was
Exactly.
when the
So
beautiful poetry came out.
that creative outlet, whether it's writing, painting, you know,
Yeah.
anything that kind of gets you in control in some ways of that reality, to
Yeah.
so that you can shape it as you will instead of having it put on you. Also, if alcoholism is something that you struggle with, um, watch who you're hanging around with, because that vibration can bring you down. And people who are trying to escape addiction often will say this, that they had to cut all the way back from their
Yeah.
friends because they just couldn't be around the energy. They say you're like basically the top 5 people that you hang around with is your energetic field. So if you take a look around that and everybody's sort of, you know, wanting to escape reality in these detrimental ways, maybe try to reach out. And oftentimes you'll see people go through the 12-step programs or reach out to the churches or whatever. And so it's that light that they see, that light at the end of the tunnel of somebody at a higher frequency. Well, okay, this is giving me a path, this is giving me a possibility. But if they're still hanging around with the same people,
Hmm.
they're you know, kind of handicapping themselves.
Yeah, I can see that. I, you know what? I basically left trauma therapy and I never picked up a drink again. That was it for me. And we didn't even have AA training or anything like that. It wasn't about that. It was dealing with what caused you the trauma, not what was the outward, what happened to have you deal with the trauma, what was the trauma. And so when I left that, that was part of the trauma, was the drinking, because it reminded me of that time period. And all I wanted to do was escape. And so the thought of the smell of drink, I was like, I don't want that because it reminds me of a dark time. So I don't want to do it.
Yeah, so it's again, that's taking control then of your environment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but it would be interesting to see. I don't know. Interesting to look at. I don't know. I've never thought about the people I'm around, but that's an interesting point.
Mhm. There's something for people to keep in mind, especially if you're socializing, you know, and on the more social end of the alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's just a few drinks, and then, you know.
Yeah, I don't know if I would want to go clubbing all night long with a bunch of. I don't know.
Well, and just understanding that, like the physical effects of alcohol, which is a whole other thing, like how it changes the brain and changes the body, and it's like your body can get stuck in this need for that quick energy, and so it becomes addictive in that way. Where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I need this to sustain me, even though it's not giving you enough nutrients. So eventually your body is starving. So I've
Yeah.
always thought that what they need to do for people who are alcoholics is give them like IVs of vitamins. They need nutrition. Like their bodies need something to counteract that so that they're not craving the quick energy that is the alcohol, which they've been conditioned to run on.
I
They,
agree.
they need a different fuel.
I craved certain things after I quit drinking that I'd never craved before. One was being sugar.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point too. So we talk about alcohol, but one step removed from that, and really just as bad in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
is sugar, is
Mhm.
food. You know, oftentimes men will become alcoholics and women will become food addicts. Like, so
Mhm.
it's just the two different representations of it, and both can really do a number on your health, you know. So no
Oh
matter
yeah.
if you're addicted to, you know, in this case it's alcohol, but again, you can fill in anything in this. You can be addicted to love. You know.
But one thing I want to say is, if you are having a problem with alcoholism, if you are a woman, don't be afraid to reach out, because in any program with alcoholism, there's always less women. They're more resistant to come forward. And that is one thing I learned in trauma therapy. Trauma therapy as well. The women feel more shame, and I don't know why. And I wish they would go get help more. That's just my PSA announcement.
It is interesting.
Yeah. All the psychologists and psychiatrists there always said, if you have women friends, please urge them, if they're having problems, to come forward. There's no shame in it, because women tend to hide it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I could see that.
And it's harder on women's bodies.
All right, so alcohol use disorder. They don't call it alcoholism, but I simplified. So it's just a pattern of using alcohol leading to clinically significant impairment or distress. So like the socializing aspect of a few drinks, obviously not the issue. It's when it gets to be a problem and a detriment to life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Alcohol is often taken in larger amounts or over a longer period than was intended. There's persistent desires or unsuccessful efforts to cut down or control its use. And that kind of leads to like the blurring of reality, like that is prominent with the Neptune. Like it's like I don't even know where I begin in reality. Like what is reality? So you get people in these hazes, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
Yeah.
they're just gonna keep going and repeating the same Groundhog Day
Mm-hmm.
over again. Um, a great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain the alcohol, craving or strong desire for it. recurrent alcohol use results in a failure to fulfill major role obligations at work, home, or school. Yes, it cannot disrupt things. It's disorder, right? Can't not go to work. And I've known many an alcoholic who goes to work just fine, and then they get off and they're at the bar, and like the cycle begins again. They barely get up to go to work, but they do, and it's to feed that addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I have to make money so that come Friday I can blow my whole paycheck.
I don't know how. That's so amazing to me.
And
It takes
and
a
they
lot of
don't
energy.
like because they're in a haze, right? So they're not even thinking. They're not capable of seeing that next day. They're
Yeah.
only trying to dull the pain in the moment. And so it really is like to deal with the trauma of, whatever it is that you're escaping from is kind of first and foremost. Like, what is it about your reality that you don't like so much that you have to blur it out? So,
And then it's addictive, and then your body, and then it's not your fault. It's a disease, and then your body just, you kind of have to have it to function.
exactly. That's why I'm such a proponent of the nutrition therapy
Yeah.
and the like really therapy. Like the people need to kind of be acclimated back to life
Yeah, for
or
sure.
to life to begin with, because a lot of times they come from trauma, and that's what they're trying to escape from.
Yeah.
Showing a different reality
Because
is
I don't think it's not someone's plan. It's not someone's like, I'm gonna do, go out and become an alcoholic.
Mhm.
It happens, and then it's a disease, and it's not, like your nutrition thing is a great idea. I think would
Yeah,
help people.
I'd love to see a pilot program on that.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
like what's the success rate? Because I know that AA's success rate, the last time I checked into it, it was like 5%.
Yeah.
Abysmal, right? No, for the 5% of people that it helps, it's great.
Hmm.
But it's because it's not getting, I think, to these underlying issues as well. It's
Yeah.
getting and out, and maybe a different frequency and vibration of people to be around, that can help. But depending on the type and what it's with, it's going to tell a different story. So alcohol use is continued despite knowing that it causes all kinds of problems. Uh, a tolerance is built up over time, and then you have withdrawal symptoms, right?
Hmm.
Which again, it's because the body is shocked and starving as it is. And so but a lot of times you'll see people who can like live off of alcohol too, because it is sugar. And depending on
Hmm.
the type of alcohol, there may be some sort of nutritional content to it.
Hmm.
Especially if it's a fruity drink or whatever, they might get like just enough for their body to get by, but overall it's deteriorating.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to take a look at Robert Downey Jr. I should have said too, so the Virgo can also be seen with alcoholism because it has to do with health and taking care of the health. And so if there's a lot going on with that, the health can get neglected,
Hmm.
right? And so there can be an aspect of that that kind of goes to the dark side. Just made me think of it because he has so much in here. But we see with Robert Downey Jr., he's got the moon conjunct Jupiter. So it's kind of that jovial kind of partying energy that then goes overboard into the addiction. It's also, his moon is opposing exactly 19 degrees to 19 degrees. So the opposing is, it's a hard aspect. So the red lines are a hard aspect. The blue lines are kind of easier one. And the green lines are kind of weird. They just don't quite vibe. They don't know what to think of each other. But in this case, it's exact. So there's that Neptune escapism with the moon.
Hmm.
It's very acute in this case. He's also got Mars here with Uranus, which can lead to kind of explosive outbursts, which he's been known for, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
diving into that alcohol and then sort of causing kerfluffles. Shall we say. That's right. And then Liz Taylor was another one I looked into.
Mm.
And she's got her sun in Pisces, conjunct her Mercury there, and Mars. So she's actually got quite a bit of stuff going on in Pisces. And Pisces is the fish. It's, ruled by Neptune, ruled by Jupiter. So it's got all that energy in it. So everybody who's got Pisces energy prominently is at kind of risk for this because of the empath
Mm.
dynamic. All of the water signs are to a degree, but Pisces tends to kind of feel the whole ocean of emotion. There's a real tapping in and a sensitivity because we are all one. And so they're feeling everybody's pain without armor.
Mhm.
Pisces is the fish. And so it can swim away, and it is escapism in that regard. So it'll be like, well, I'm not dealing with reality right now. I'm going to swim into this bottle for a while.
Yeah.
Whereas like Cancer and Scorpio, they also feel things very deeply, but they have a shell. They each have shells
Oh.
that can protect themselves. So Cancer will go home
Mhm.
into my hidey hole, into my hole on the beach. And Scorpio has not only the shell and is very tough, but it has the stinger.
Okay.
Cancer has the claws too. And I guess fish can bite, so they're not completely defenseless, but it's just something that I find interesting that they all will handle it in different ways.
Oh, that is interesting.
And so that ability to transmute the trauma instead of like letting the alcoholism rule you
Mhm.
is a very scorpionic take on that. It's like, well, I'm going to face my trauma head on, and then I'm not going to like go down that path.
Okay.
I have a fair amount of this energy and Jupiter on my moon, and I was surrounded by alcoholics in my whole life,
Mhm.
So like what stopped me was not wanting to go down that path that I saw, not wanting something to have that much control over me
Because you observed it.
because I observed it. So I took a different path of empowerment. However, I did take the path of sugar that I spoke of earlier. And I was very, very much addicted to food. So
Yeah.
I just took a different path, really, but I was a little bit more in control. Like you don't lose your mind as much with food, so it's a little bit maybe more of a socially acceptable addiction. But it did hurt me in a lot of different ways. So
I still have like some candy I have candy every day. I have to. I will say you crave sugar when you don't have the alcohol. I never craved sugar because I just never did before. And for the 4 years that it was not good for me, when I just said I don't want to anymore drink at all, it just reminds me of being in a bad place. I want sugar.
mhm.
And so, like, I have dessert now, but it's like, I try to keep it to like raisins and bananas and stuff like that. But I have M&Ms and stuff like that.
Everything in moderation,
Bag
right?
of them or anything, but I'll have like little bits of M&Ms and stuff like that.
Exactly. And people can have social drinks and be just fine,
Yeah.
But people that have this deep Neptune energy just have to be aware that they have that tendency,
Yeah.
that escapism. So, and with the celebrities, they'll channel it into their acting, they'll channel it into their creativity, in some way, shape, or form, like Stephen King,
Oh
you
yeah.
know.
Hmm.
Very famously wrote a lot of his books while inebriated in some way, shape, or form. Didn't even remember writing Cujo.
Are you serious?
Serious.
Oh my God, I did not
He
know
wrote
that.
it while he was in a cocaine-fueled haze.
Well, that kind of makes sense with the book Cujo, I guess. It's got a lot of
And he's got
raging things.
Neptune, Mercury right here.
Oh.
So Mercury is writing, and Neptune is very creative too. Neptune is tapping into the ether and pulling stories. It's very creative, beautiful energy in that high vibration. So he would get inebriated and tap right in. He's talked himself about how it's like he was just looking at another world and writing about it. Like that's his process. It's exactly Neptune, Mercury. So I found that
Oh,
interesting.
that's interesting.
And then he's got his sun in Virgo too. And he's a Cancer rising with Mars there too. So like very empathic, very much a sponge, having to be aware of who he's hanging around with. You know, he would sequester himself in a closet. Very sensitive to rejection, even though he just went at it kind of head on, which is very Mars. Like Mars is like,
Wow.
I'm going to do this thing. So it can be very energizing on the one hand, but also it hurt. Like, and he's talked about that too. Like, he put them up there as motivation, but also it was like, damn. And eventually it got to him with Carrie. Like, he was ready to call it quits. He
Hmm.
took Carrie and put it in the trash can, and his wife took it out of the trash and sent it in,
Wow.
and it got picked up. Like, that's how the story goes. So, support also matters. Like, as much as we have this kind of collective, every person is an island and you have to be full and able to do everything on your own, and we're not built that way. Like
Yeah.
we're very social, you know, we're
Mhm.
tribal. So while it's all good to be able to handle your own stuff, where would Stephen King be without his wife believing in him
Yeah.
enough to pick it up and send it off? She could have left it there and just been like, all right, just keep teaching, which is what he was doing.
Mm.
But she was like, it's good. I'm sending it off. He's having a day. You know, maybe he's drunk that day, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. So,
I wonder if he finds it hard. Did he quit drinking?
yeah.
I wonder if he found it hard to write when he had to face like writing the first time without
Yeah.
drinking.
He did say that it was an adjustment.
Yeah. That would
But,
be it would take a lot of strength to sit down and say, okay, let's see how this goes.
but also, like, he's got this aspect. So it's always there with him.
Yeah. But I'm
It's
just
just
saying
a
it would
matter of,
be like a weird moment, to be like, okay.
and by the time he stops, like, by the time he stopped drinking, he was already a household name.
Oh no, I know, but just
You
personally,
know?
as like just him. I mean, he didn't have to prove anything, but just as a personal experience to
Yeah.
sit down and be like, wow, this is different.
Yeah,
Like,
so it's finding another frequency. So if you find that you get more creative when you have a drink, and sometimes this is a thing in the writer world, like they'll
yeah.
talk about, like, have a drink, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as you don't take it overboard. But
Hmm.
it lowers the inhibitions. It can access this Neptunian realm. So
Hmm.
whether or not you have a prominent Neptune, you can access this. Neptune rules alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So you can be like, well, I want to be creative, so I'm going to have a little bit of this.
Right.
You just then would look at some of the other things that Neptune is affiliated with. The ocean, for one, like being around bodies of water, being relaxed.
Yeah.
Neptune deals with rest and rejuvenation.
Yeah.
So being kind of secluded and isolated in nature, right? These other things that can be equally as inspiring, just not maybe detrimental
Yeah.
to them. So, and I think that he takes frequent walks, you know,
Yeah.
and
That would be interesting to find like your new outlets, like new sources.
yeah, spirituality is often one. Like,
Yeah.
again, people who really go from being in the gutters to being highly spiritual, and that's why, because it's a path out. It's like now you're shaping reality because reality is a mindset,
Hmm.
you know, and so then you get to shape it your way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mhm. And then the last one that I have here is Billy Joel. You
Mhm.
know, he's kind of famously struggled with this as well, and he's got Neptune conjunct his moon. So all of these examples happen to be like Neptune, Jupiter, but some of the other things I talked about can be present as well. However, in my experience, it's overwhelmingly these two in some way
Hmm,
who are at play. So if
interesting.
you can kind of master the higher degree of, you know, Jupiter deals with optimism and hope. Being able to kind of see the horizon and what if. And so it gets out of that moment of despair that a lot of alcoholics can be in and be like, well, what could my world look like if I just took one step down that path and then
Mhm.
another and another? And, you know, working with the energy in that way. And then in the transits with this stuff, you might have things like, for example, with Billy Joel right now, his Jupiter is at 1 degree of Aquarius, where Pluto is at present. So he's got Pluto's planet of transformation and really deep introspection on that sense of hope and optimism. On that sense, I like to look at Jupiter as like the guardian angel in the higher end.
Mm,
You know, so there's like a transformation of that energy happening in his place in society, which is Aquarian energy in some way, shape, or form. Like, how is he viewing society and what he can do, what he has say in with it? You know, I
yeah.
would expect all of that thing to be, all of those things to be directly being blown up in his life right now. Maybe on a more personal level, he might be dealing with some trauma that he hadn't dealt with in the past.
That's interesting.
But you know, knowing him, he's probably in a higher vibration of this, which is really just helping other people to rise into their potential in society at large. So it's interesting then to see
Yeah,
how these things can work off of each other that way.
it's really cool.
But that's what I have on alcoholism. If I do offer chart readings, if anybody's interested in looking in your chart, or if this is something you struggle with, or just kind of are curious as to what your chart has to say, you can contact me at the information below. It's phoenixrose.net. And it can be quite guiding and eye-opening to work through some of these things. So, and Sarah, thank you again for joining
Thank
us.
you. It's always good. It's always good to be
And
here. Very
yes,
insightful.
and your insights are insightful as well.
Thank
So,
you.
and anybody who's interested in being involved in the next Astrology versus Psychology, we kind of meet up at 6:30 p.m. Central Time at the Authortunities Hub, which is linked below. It's an algorithm-free community. It's part of the Mighty Network, but it's an amazing place for writers, for creative types of all stretches, for Neptunian people. You know, it's a very inclusive environment that is not one of the main, it's not Facebook or Twitter, you know, anything like that. And it's growing. So we'd love to have you join us there. And until next time, like, share, subscribe, let this information get out there. You know, if somebody's struggling with alcoholism, it's not necessarily a personal failing. It's something that they have control over and can do something about. They just might need help in some of these kind of out of the box ways that I discussed, you know. So don't give up hope if this is you. There's absolutely ways to transmute this energy. So, and until next time, have a good night.
Good night, everyone.